Marcus Reeves walked into Roosevelt Elementary School's cafeteria at 1:22 on a Tuesday afternoon, expecting to grab a forgotten jacket and be back at the shop by 2. He had a transmission rebuild waiting a customer who'd already called twice in exactly 43 minutes of daylight he could afford to lose before the backlog turned into a problem. The cafeteria smelled like institutional pizza and bleach. 340 students eating lunch at long tables under fluorescent lights that hummed in a frequency just below conscious hearing. The kind of sound that lived in your skull after you left. He spotted Elise at table 14, alone. Pink hoodie 3 sizes too large, sleeves rolled at the cuffs the way children roll things when they're trying to hold themselves together. One hand on the table, one hand hidden beneath it. Marcus crossed the cafeteria in 9 strides, not fast enough to draw attention, not slow enough to look uncertain. The walk of a man who'd learned how to move through rooms without making people nervous. 6'1", 238 pounds leather vest over a gray long-sleeve shirt, and a presence that made mothers pull their children closer in grocery store aisles, even though he'd never raised his voice to a stranger in his life. He'd learned to manage that, learn to smile first, speak quietly, make himself readable. Learned it the hard way in a family court 3 years ago, when a judge looked at the patches on his vest and decided that was the whole story worth knowing. Elise looked up when his shadow fell across her tray. Her first movement wasn't joy or relief. It was to push her right hand further under the table. Then she smiled, gap-toothed, careful. The kind of smile that had learned not to expect much. "Uncle Marcus, you're early. Came to check on you." Her tray held a bread roll and a carton of milk. Nothing else. 30 feet away, the steam line hissed with hot pizza, chicken nuggets, mashed potatoes. A lunch monitor's whistle shrilled in the far corner. A motivational banner hung directly above table 14, yellow letters on blue fabric, the words big enough to read from anywhere in the room. "Every student matters." Marcus looked at the bread roll, untouched, looked at Elise. "You gonna eat that?" She glanced toward the lunch line, toward a woman in a hairnet and a lanyard who was watching them now. Carol Weaver, cafeteria supervisor, mid-40s, the expression of someone who'd worked food service long enough to have seen every parent complaint and learn which ones required action and which ones required patience. Elise's shoulders came forward slightly, making herself smaller. "I'm not really hungry." Marcus had heard his daughter Cassidy say that exact sentence 3 years ago in a supervised visitation room when she was trying to make things easier for him. He'd known it was a lie then. He knew it was a lie now. He reached out slowly, checking her eyes first, and took her right hand gently in both of his. She resisted for half a second, then let him turn it over. Red ink stamp across her small knuckles. Block letters, still damp at the edges where it had been pressed hard enough to leave ridges in her skin. Lunch debt, $67. He looked at that stamp for 4 full seconds without speaking, did not look away from it, did not let his expression change, even though something in his chest was trying to crack open. "You don't hide from me," he said quietly. "I've got you." Elise's eyes filled. She blinked fast, jaw tight, the specific control of a child who'd gotten very good at not crying in public places. "It's been since February," she whispered. "Mrs. Weaver stamps us in the lunch line if our account is red. I didn't tell you because you already paid and I didn't want you to be upset." "Us." She'd said us, plural. Marcus scanned the cafeteria. 17 children scattered at edge tables near the recycling bins near the windows, near the walls. 17 children eating bread and milk while the steam line hissed and the banner above them promised that every student mattered. Last Friday, she took my tray away in the line. Elise's voice dropped lower. In front of everyone, she said I knew the rules. Marcus's jaw tightened. His hands stayed gentle around hers. Carol Weaver was walking toward them now, sensible shoes on linoleum. A woman who'd worked this cafeteria for 6 years and had learned that there were rules and there were people who asked about the rules, and the people who asked rarely understood how the rules worked. Sir, visiting hours require. I'm her guardian, Marcus said without standing, without raising his voice. And I'm looking at a stamp on her hand that says she owes money I already paid twice. Carol Weaver stopped 3 feet from the table. Her expression shifted into something practiced, professional concern. The system shows a balance of $67. If payments were submitted, they would have been applied. The lunch debt notification is simply a communication tool, not a punishment. She's 8 years old, Marcus said quietly, and you stamp debt on her skin. She's eating. She has milk and bread. That's a complete snack. Marcus stood, slowly, careful not to move fast. Carol Weaver took half a step back anyway. A bread roll and a milk carton is not a complete snack when there's pizza 30 feet away that federal money is paying for. I made 2 payments. I have confirmation emails. You want to explain to me where that money went? You'll need to contact the district payment support line. I did. They gave me a form that takes 30 days to process. That's the process we have. How many days has my niece been eating bread while you serve hot meals to everyone else? Carol Weaver's face shifted. Not guilt, not quite. Something closer to the specific discomfort of a person who'd followed instructions that sounded reasonable when they were written down and looked different when someone was asking about them out loud. I don't make the policy, I follow it. If you have concerns, the front office, Elise's hand tightened around Marcus's. He looked down at her, at the gap between her front teeth that she used to show when she smiled widely and didn't anymore, at the dark circles under her eyes that came from a body that wasn't sleeping deeply because it wasn't getting enough to sleep on, at the spelling bee trophy she kept in her backpack's front pocket because home had changed and things got lost, but the trophy was proof that she'd once been a child a room had applauded. 22 days, while he'd called the payment support line, while he'd filled out forms, while the system designed to move slowly had moved exactly as designed. Elise, he said quietly, did you tell anyone this was happening? She nodded. Miss Aldrich, my teacher. She filed a form. And Miss Ferris, the counselor, she called you. And what happened? Nothing. Miss Aldridge got reminded at a staff meeting that nutrition concerns go through the cafeteria, not teachers. And Miss Ferris sent a message to the office, but they said you had to use the portal. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from his foreman asking where he was. He had 4 diagnostics waiting at the shop. He had rent due Friday. He had exactly $1,847 in his checking account and a work schedule that didn't bend easily. He looked at Carol Weaver, at the parent volunteer at the tray station who'd seen the stamp and turned her back, at the front office visible through the cafeteria's glass doors where a secretary was answering phones and processing the 3-page complaint form that required notarization and took 30 business days to review. 30 days that would close exactly 4 days after the annual federal audit period ended. He pulled out his phone. What are you doing? Elise asked. Calling someone who answers. The line rang twice. Ironside, Marcus's voice was very quiet, very steady. It's Reeves. I'm at Elise's school. I need you to see something. Talk to me. How fast can you get to Roosevelt Elementary, Holly Springs? There was a pause on the line, not hesitation, calculation. Gideon Ironside Patterson had led 3 missing child searches that police had abandoned. He didn't ask questions that could wait. 30 minutes. What am I walking into? A cafeteria full of kids eating lunch. 17 of them with debt stamped on their hands, eating bread while everyone else eats hot meals. My niece hasn't had a hot lunch in 22 days. I paid twice. Money disappeared. System says 30-day review. The audit window closes in 11 days. Another pause. Longer. How many adults are aware teachers filed reports? Got shut down. Counselor escalated. Got redirected to a complaint form. School board member toured the building this morning and told a parent complaints aren't their lane. Ironside's voice changed, dropped lower. Reeves, yeah. How many kids? 17. The line went quiet for 3 seconds. Marcus heard a door close on Ironside's end. Heard voices in the background fade. I'm making calls. Don't leave that building. Do not engage further. Just stay with her until I get there. Understood. Understood. And Reeves, document everything. Take photos of that stamp. Get names of the other kids if you can without making it worse. We're going to need evidence. The line went dead. Marcus looked at Elise. She was watching him with the specific caution of a child who'd seen adults get upset on her behalf before and had watched nothing change. The upset had cost them. She'd absorbed the cost. Uncle Marcus, what did you do? He knelt again. Eye level. I called family. They're coming to help. Are you going to get in trouble? No, baby. But some other people are. She pulled something from her hoodie pocket, a piece of notebook paper folded small, worn soft at the creases from being carried. She unfolded it slowly, her handwriting, careful, shaky in places. 30 days plus April 19th plus Wake County plus. Doesn't exist plus. He said your name. Marcus read it twice. What is this? 3 weeks ago, I forgot my jacket after school and came back to get it. The principal's office door was open. He was talking to Mrs. Weaver and a lady from the district. I heard them say your name and something about 30 days and the 19th in Wake County and something that doesn't exist. I didn't understand, but I wrote it down. Marcus's hands were shaking. Not rage, not yet. Something colder, sharper. Elise, did the principal, his name's Mr. Vaughn, right? She nodded. Did he see you? No. I left. But Uncle Marcus, I heard the lady from the district say families requalify and he said not to reprocess them. And Mrs. Weaver said you were going to come in and he said to send you the complaint form? And it takes 30 days and the audit closes on the 19th. Marcus looked at the note, at the words an 8-year-old had written in pencil because she didn't understand them, but trusted him enough to bring them anyway. At the date, 3 weeks ago, 2 days before he'd called the district support line and been told there was a process, 1 day before Ms. Ferris had escalated his complaint to the office and been handed the same 30-day form, he stood, took a photo of Elise's hand with the stamp, took a photo of her tray, bread roll, milk carton, nothing else, took a photo of the banner above her table, every student matters. Then he walked to the other 16 children and asked their names quietly, gently. Most of them recognized his vest. A few pulled back. One little boy, maybe 6 years old, showed his hand without being asked. Mr. You a good guy or a bad guy? A good guy. You gonna fix this? Yeah, buddy, I'm gonna fix this. By the time Marcus returned to table 14, Carol Weaver had called the front office. By the time he sat back down beside Elise, the school secretary was on the phone with the principal. By the time the first Harley engine rumbled into the school parking lot 28 minutes later, Kenneth Vaughn was walking toward the cafeteria with a practiced expression of patient concern and absolutely no idea that the man in the vest he was about to dismiss had just triggered the largest single-purpose biker mobilization Wake County had seen in 11 years. Gideon Ironside Patterson was 64 years old, had been riding with Hells Angels North Carolina chapter for 19 years, and had learned a long time ago that the fastest way to lose a child was to move slowly. He'd been in a strategy meeting in Garner, 16 brothers discussing a charity poker run when Reeves's call came through. He'd closed the meeting in 4 sentences. Brother's child in immediate need. Holly Springs, every available rider meets at the town hall in 45 minutes. Move. No vote, no debate. Tank grabbed his vest. Steele checked his phone. Reaper was out the door before Ironside finished speaking. Within 7 minutes, the first calls went out to the Durham chapter. Within 12, a rider from Fayetteville, whose daughter had been identified in Reeves's list of 17, was pulling onto I-40 southbound. Ironside made 5 calls in the truck, 3 to chapter sergeants, 1 to Razorback, a former Wake County School Board attorney who'd left after being asked to overlook a contract irregularity he wouldn't sign off on. 1 to Gravel, a former North Carolina DSS child welfare investigator who knew exactly which forms to file, with which supervisors to unseal a settled school complaint. Gravel, it's Ironside. I need you at Holly Springs Town Hall in 1 hour with everything you know about federal school lunch fraud, sealed district settlements, and how to request a USD, a Office of Inspector General, referral. What happened? 17 kids denied hot meals while a principal collects federal funding. 2 parents tried to pay. Money disappeared. Systems running a 30-day review that closes 4 days after the audit window. And there's a sealed Wake County settlement with a principal's name attached that nobody at the new district knows about. Gravel swore quietly. Fukuoka Varina Elementary. I remember that case. Marrow family. Kid was malnourished. Parents said the school lunch policy did it. District paid out $163,900 and sealed everything. Principal transferred under a mutual development agreement. That principal at Roosevelt now. If it's Kenneth Vaughn, yes, then we're unsealing it. 1 hour, town hall. The brothers arrived in waves, the first 16 by 147, another 23 by 210. By 3 o'clock, 62 motorcycles lined the public parking lot across from Roosevelt Elementary in perfect formation. Chrome gleaming, engines silent, leather cuts bearing the same insignia. They didn't block the school entrance, didn't rev engines, didn't shout. They just stood there, visible, present, waiting. Ironside walked across the street to the school entrance at 3:14. 6 brothers flanked him, not as muscle, as witnesses. Razorback carried a leather document folder. Gravel carried a tablet with the NSLP federal program guidelines pulled up. A younger brother named Halftone, a freelance documentary filmmaker with press credentials, carried a camera on his shoulder. The school receptionist looked up as 7 men in Hells Angels vests walked through the doors. Her hand moved toward the phone. Ironside spoke before she could lift the receiver. Ma'am, my name is Gideon Patterson. I'm here to speak with Principal Vaughn regarding a federal nutrition program concern involving 17 students and 2 unprocessed payments. This is not a threat. This is documentation. May I wait here until he's available? She blinked. I'll need to call. That's fine. We'll wait. They stood in the front lobby. Razorback set the folder on the receptionist's desk. Gravel opened his tablet and began taking notes. Halftone positioned his camera to capture the front office. Not aggressively, just present. A parent walking through the doors saw them froze, then hurried past. The receptionist made a call. Her voice was very quiet. Mr. Vaughn. There are, there are 7 men here. They say they need to speak with you about lunch accounts. 60 seconds later, Kenneth Vaughn walked into the lobby. He was 5'10" trim, wearing khakis and an Oxford shirt with the sleeves rolled precisely to mid-forearm. His hair was side-parted, beginning to silver at the temples. He looked at the vests. He looked at Halftone's camera. His expression shifted, not to fear, to calculation. Gentlemen, I'm Principal Vaughn. How can I help you? Ironside extended his hand. Vaughn shook it. Firm professional, a man who'd shaken a lot of hands at a lot of PTA meetings and knew how to make it look natural. Mr. Vaughn, I'm here because one of your students, Elise Reeves, has been denied hot meals for 22 school days, despite her guardian submitting 2 confirmed payments through the district portal. We've identified 16 additional students in the same situation. We'd like to understand why. Vaughn's smile didn't waver. I appreciate your concern. Student nutrition accounts are managed through the district's central office. If there's a payment processing issue, the guardian needs to contact the support line. He did, 3 weeks ago. He was given a form that requires notarization and a 30-day review period. The federal audit window closes in 11 days, meaning any complaint filed today won't be reviewed before the audit period ends. Vaughn's smile tightened fractionally. I don't control the district's complaint timeline. That's a board policy. A board policy you recommended, Razorback said quietly. He opened the folder, pulled out a printed document. You submitted a suggested revision to the grievance processing timeline 2 years ago, extended the review window from 14 days to 30. The board adopted it without revision. That 30-day window aligns precisely with the annual federal audit period, meaning no parent complaint processed during the final month of the school year will be reviewed before the audit closes. Vaughn looked at the document. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes recalculated. I suggested that revision to ensure thorough review, not to delay anything. Then why Gravel said, does your cafeteria supervisor report that you instructed her not to accept payment corrections at the lunch line, but to direct all parents to the district portal and the complaint form? Where did you hear that, Mrs. Carol Weaver? She's been very cooperative. Vaughn's jaw tightened. If you're recording this conversation without my consent, we're not recording anything, Ironside said. We're asking questions and documenting your answers, which is legal, public, and protected. Now, you mentioned the district's central office manages accounts. That's true. But you, as principal, control which families receive notification of their eligibility for the National School Lunch Program, free and reduced price meals, federally funded. You're the institutional point of contact. So I'm asking directly, how many eligible families at this school have not been notified of the program? Silence. Mr. Vaughn, how many NSLP applications have been submitted to your office in the past 2 years that were never processed? Vaughn's hands were very still at his sides. That's a district-level data question. I don't have those numbers readily available, 47 Gravel said flatly. 47 families report submitting applications that don't appear in the district system. We pulled public enrollment data, cross-referenced it against state-free and reduced-price meal eligibility guidelines. Your school should have at least 63 more students enrolled in NSLP than currently are, which means either your school has the wealthiest low-income population in Wake County or someone is suppressing applications. Vaughn's face went very still. That's a serious accusation. It's a question, and I've answered it. If applications are missing, that's a clerical error at the district level. I don't personally process applications, but you do personally approve infrastructure grant applications, Razorback said. 3 in the past 2 years, all citing a documented lunch funding gap and emergency cafeteria equipment needs. All awarded to Cornerstone Kitchen Solutions, Holly Springs, owned and operated by Marcus Vaughn, your brother. The lobby went very quiet. Vaughn's voice stayed level, calm. Cornerstone was awarded those contracts through a competitive bidding process managed by the district. I recuse myself from the vendor selection. You recused yourself from the selection, but you wrote the grant applications that justified the funding. Applications that cite a critical lunch funding shortage caused by high debt levels and low NSLP enrollment. Low enrollment that your office controls. Vaughn's smile was gone now. Gentlemen, this conversation is moving into territory that requires legal counsel. I'm going to ask you to leave the building. We're standing in a public school lobby during business hours. Ironside said, we're not raising our voices. We're not blocking access. We're asking questions about federal program funding and a child who hasn't eaten a hot meal in 3 weeks. If you'd like us to leave, you're welcome to call the police. We'll wait outside and continue this conversation with them. Vaughn looked at Halftone's camera, at the folder on the desk, at the receptionist whose face had gone pale. I need to make a phone call. Take your time. Vaughn walked back toward his office. His stride was measured, controlled, but his shoulders were higher than they'd been when he walked in. Ironside looked at his brothers. Razorback was already on his phone texting someone. Gravel was typing notes. Halftone adjusted his camera angle to capture the Every Student Matters poster on the wall beside the receptionist's desk. Outside, 62 motorcycles sat in silent formation. By 4 o'clock, 73 more would arrive from Durham. By nightfall, 191 Hells Angels would be staged at Holly Springs Town Hall, exactly 400 feet from Roosevelt Elementary School's front entrance. And in the cafeteria, Elise Reeves sat at table 14, with her uncle's hand around hers, a bread roll she still hadn't eaten, and a piece of notebook paper that said, Wake County and doesn't exist. Words that would in exactly 16 hours unseal a settlement, trigger a federal investigation, and prove that the scariest thing a predator can face isn't violence. It's documentation. By 6:47 the next morning, 191 motorcycles lined Holly Springs Town Hall's public parking lot in formation so precise it looked rehearsed. It wasn't. It was the coordinated efficiency of men who'd ridden together for years, who knew how to stage a presence without creating chaos, who understood that discipline was louder than noise. The rumble started low, distant, like thunder building on the horizon. Then it grew. A roar that shook windows 3 blocks away and set off car alarms along Millbrook Park Drive. 191 engines, chrome gleaming in the early light, leather cuts bearing the same insignia. The sound peaked, held for exactly 7 seconds, then cut off almost in unison. The sudden silence after all that noise felt heavy, expectant. Holly Springs Police Department sent 3 units. They parked at the edge of the lot, watched the bikers dismount, watched them line up in rows without a single shout or shove, did nothing because nothing illegal was happening. Public property, peaceful assembly, 0 threats, just presence. Now you might be thinking 191 Hells Angels show up at a school and fists start flying. Leather and chrome and rage. That's the story you've been taught to expect, isn't it? The one where bikers mean violence and Ks and broken windows. But what actually unfolded over the next 14 hours was something far more terrifying to a man like Kenneth Vaughn than any thrown punch could ever be. It was procedure. Ironside stood at the front of the formation as the sun crested the tree line. Behind him, brothers from 3 chapters, 62 from Garner, 73 from Durham, 56 from Fayetteville. Some had driven through the night. One had called in sick to work for the first time in 4 years. Another had postponed his daughter's birthday party and brought her with him because she had asked to see what protecting people look like. "Listen up," Ironside said. His voice carried without amplification. "We are not here to intimidate. We are not here to threaten. We are here to document, to witness, and to ensure that 17 children who have been systematically denied food while their school collects federal funding are heard. Every interaction is calm. Every word is measured. Anyone who loses their temper leaves immediately. Understood." 191 voices in unison. "Understood." Razorback stepped forward. 49 years old, former Wake County School Board attorney, the man who'd quit rather than overlook a contract irregularity and had spent the intervening years wondering if walking away had been the right choice. He wasn't wondering anymore. "We're on public property. We have the right to peaceful assembly. We have the right to request public records. We have the right to file complaints with federal or oversight agencies. And as of 6:15 this morning, we have the right to accompany Marcus Reeves, Elise Reeves's legal guardian, into any meeting he requests with school administration. North Carolina law permits a parent or guardian to bring an advocate to any education-related meeting." Gravel was 56, ex-DSS investigator. The man who'd spent 17 years removing children from dangerous homes and had learned to spot the exact moment a system chose paperwork over safety. He'd seen that moment at Fukuoka Varina Elementary 3 years ago when his request to subpoena lunch records was denied at the supervisory level. He wasn't letting it happen again. "I filed a formal request with Wake County Schools at 5:42 this morning to unseal the Marrow settlement." Fukuoka Varina Elementary, March 2022, citing new evidence of pattern behavior and public safety concern. "I also contacted the USDA Office of Inspector General and requested an emergency review of NSLP funding compliance at Roosevelt Elementary. That triggers a mandatory audit hold, meaning no grant applications currently under review can be approved until the OIG completes their investigation." Ironside nodded. Crowbar. Crowbar was 65. Retired North Carolina State Highway Patrol, 22 years on the force. He knew every magistrate, judge, and sheriff's deputy in Wake County on a first-name basis. He'd made one phone call at 7:14 this morning. That call had done more damage to Kenneth Vaughn's defense than any confrontation could. Spoke with Judge Morrison. Explained the situation. He's issuing an order to unseal the Marrow settlement by 11:30 this morning. Says if there's pattern evidence and a current victim's sealed agreements don't protect future harm. He's also putting the DA's office on notice. If we bring him probable cause for fraud, he'll fast-track the warrant. Halftone stepped forward. 38 years old, documentary filmmaker, credentialed journalist. The moment Kenneth Vaughn's communications coordinator realized his press credentials were legitimate, the entire institutional closing of ranks dynamic had shifted. Because ignoring concerned parents was policy, ignoring the press was career suicide. Cameras ready. I've got interviews scheduled with 3 parents whose payments disappeared. I've got Carol Weaver on record saying she was instructed not to accept corrections at the lunch line. And I've got footage of that banner in the cafeteria. Every student matters, right above the table where kids eat bread while everyone else eats hot meals. Ironside looked across the parking lot toward the school. Lights were on in the main office. A car pulled into the staff lot. Early arrival, probably a teacher. The day was starting. Then let's go to work. Donna Cresswell was 54 years old and had worked Roosevelt Elementary's cafeteria for 9 years. She loved the kids, hated the policy, and 3 weeks ago, when she'd reported her concern about the stamping to a district compliance officer, she knew through a parent group she'd been called into Vaughn's office the following Monday and told that discussing internal operational procedures with outside parties violated her employment agreement. She hadn't reported anything since, until Razorback knocked on her apartment door at 8:17 with a recorder, a witness, and a promise that her testimony would be protected. Miss Creswell, can you describe the lunch debt stamping policy as it was explained to you? Donna sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't drunk from. Her voice was quiet but clear. Mr. Vaughn implemented it in his first year here. He called it a parent communication tool, said it was just a way to remind families about outstanding balances so they'd know to check their accounts. When did you first apply the stamp? October. 3 years ago. He had them ordered through the school supply vendor, like an official purchase order, not something he bought at Staples. Came in a box of 12 with red ink pads. He showed us how to do it at a staff meeting, demonstrated on his own hand. Did anyone object? Her jaw tightened. Mrs. Weaver asked if we could use a letter instead, something the kids could take home in their backpacks. Mr. Vaughn said the point was immediate visibility, that parents needed to see the notification when they picked up their kids, that it was more effective than a letter that might get lost. How many children have you stamped? I stopped counting after 40. But I've seen the same kids come through week after week. Elise Reeves, Kira Bennett, Marcus Rios. They know the routine now. They hold out their hands before I even reach for the stamp. Her voice broke. She set the mug down, pressed her palms flat against the table. I knew it was wrong. I knew it the first time I did it and saw a little boy pull his sleeve down to cover it before he walked back to his classroom. But I have a daughter in college and a mortgage, and Mr. Vaughn made it very clear what happened to people who questioned his policies. Mrs. Weaver tried, got nowhere. I tried, got called in, and when I went to the compliance office, when I tried to go over his head, I got reminded that I was an hourly employee and policies came from administration, not the lunch line. Ms. Creswell Razorback said gently, "You're not the villain in this story. I'm not the hero either." "No, but you're here now, and that's what matters." Her testimony took 47 minutes. She cried twice. Halftone filmed all of it. By the time she finished, Razorback had 17 pages of notes confirmation that Vaughn had purchased the stamps deliberately and a name. Sylvia Hargrove, district nutrition coordinator who'd been present at the implementation meeting and had raised no objections. Phoebe Washington was 66, a crossing guard at Roosevelt Elementary for 14 years. She'd seen 3 children eating food from their backpacks at the bus stop in February. Crackers, a bruised apple, a half sandwich wrapped in a napkin. She'd filed a written report with the front office stating that students appeared to be bringing supplemental food because they weren't eating adequately at school. She'd received no response. She'd kept her own log anyway. Force of habit from 14 years of documenting everything. Late buses, traffic incidents, weather delays. She kept everything. Gravel sat across from her in the Holly Springs Public Library at 9:30. She'd brought a spiral notebook, dated entries, February 4th through April 1st, 17 names, times observed, what they were eating. Miss Washington, why did you keep this? Because something felt wrong, and I've been doing this job long enough to know that when something feels wrong and nobody listens, you'd better have proof when someone finally does. Her log became evidence, not just of the lunch policy, but of how many adults had tried to report it and been ignored. Teachers who filed concern slips that disappeared. A school nurse who documented weight loss in 3 students and been told to notify parents, not administration. A custodian who'd found uneaten bread rolls in the trash at the end of every lunch period and mentioned it to Mrs. Weaver, who told him to focus on his job. Dr. Gerald Vance was 46, a pediatric nurse practitioner at Holly Springs Pediatrics. He'd seen Elise Reeves for a well-child visit on February 14th and had noted in her chart nutritional intake concerns. Patient reports inconsistent meals at school, weight 51 pounds, down 6 pounds since October. Recommend dietary consult if weight loss continues. He hadn't known the lunch policy was the cause. Nobody had told him. But his chart note became the first independently corroborated piece of medical evidence that the stamping policy had created measurable harm. Razorback pulled his testimony at 10:15 via phone. Mr. Vance, in your clinical opinion, what does a 6-pound weight loss over 5 months indicate in an otherwise healthy 8-year-old? It indicates inadequate caloric intake. At her age and activity level, she should be gaining weight, not losing it. A 6-pound loss is significant. And given that she reported the school lunch program as her primary hot meal, the connection is direct. Did you file a report? I documented it in her chart and recommended follow-up. I didn't know at the time that the issue was systematic denial of food. If I had, I would have filed a mandatory report with DSS immediately. His testimony took 9 minutes. When it ended, Razorback had medical documentation that Elise Reeves's health had deteriorated directly as a result of the lunch policy, documentation that would become the foundation for criminal charges, not just policy violations. At 11:30, Crowbar's phone rang. Judge Morrison's clerk. The Marrow settlement was unsealed. Gravel had it pulled and printed within 20 minutes. The brothers gathered at the town hall staging area. Razorback laid out the documents on a folding table someone had brought from the back of a truck. Ironside stood at the center. 60 brothers pressed close. The rest maintained perimeter watch, making sure no one left the school without being seen. This is the Marrow settlement, Gravel said. March 2022, Fukuoka Varina Elementary. Jalen Marrow, age 7 at the time, was enrolled in the district's at-risk student monitoring program. DSS had flagged him as potentially food insecure. The school and the principal were his primary institutional point of contact. He flipped to the second page. February 2022. Jalen's pediatrician documented moderate malnutrition, weight 12 pounds below standard range. Filed a mandatory DSS report. DSS investigated the home, found no abuse, did not investigate the school. Why not, someone asked. Because Kenneth Vaughn told them the family was non-compliant with the lunch payment system and that he'd offered resources multiple times. Blame the parents. DSS accepted it. How did it get unsealed? Jalen's mother testified before the State Board of Education in October 2023. Her testimony wasn't entered into Vaughn's personnel file, which is the specific data field that transfers with a principal across districts. The settlement was classified as Facilities and Operations Review, Settlement FY22, in the budget records. Nobody connected it to a child welfare case because it was never coded as one. Razorback leaned forward. How much did Wake County pay $163,900? Silence. And Vaughn transferred to Roosevelt when August 2022, 5 months after the settlement, under a mutual professional development agreement, not terminated, not disciplined. Three staff members who could have corroborated the lunch debt policy at Fukuoka Varina were reassigned to different schools in the same 30-day window. Ironside's jaw was tight, so the district buried it. The district paid for it, sealed it, moved him, and never told Roosevelt's administration that their new principal had presided over a child's malnutrition severe enough to warrant a six-figure settlement. That's not a failure, someone said quietly. That's a system working exactly as designed. Gravel nodded, to protect itself, not the kids. At 12:40, an anonymous district budget analyst, identity protected at their request, contacted Razorback through a third party. They'd raised an internal query 8 months ago about the Cornerstone Kitchen Solutions invoices. Specifically that the line item costs were 40 to 60% above verified market rates for comparable equipment. They'd been transferred to a different role within 2 weeks. No explanation, just a reassignment notice and a reminder about confidentiality agreements. They provided copies of the invoices. 3 grant cycles, 3 awards. Grant 1, $89,400 approved. Cornerstone invoiced $127,300. Difference $37,900. Grant 2, $114,300 approved. Cornerstone invoiced $168,100. Difference $53,800. Grant 3, $113,700 pending approval. Projected Cornerstone invoice $179,500. Projected difference $65,800. Total diverted across 3 cycles $157,500 documented. $223,300 projected. How does this work? Tank asked. He was a mechanic like Marcus, understood equipment costs, understood when someone was inflating a bid. Razorback pulled up a comparison sheet. Here's the market rate for a commercial 6-burner range. $4,800. Cornerstone charged $7,200. Same range. Same model, 50% markup. Do that across 20 line items per grant cycle, and you're looking at an extra $50,000 to $60,000 per cycle that flows back to Marcus Vaughn. And where does that money go? That's what we need the FBI to answer. At 1:15, Special Agent Naomi Brennan from the FBI's Charlotte field office walked into the town hall parking lot. She was in plain clothes, practical jacket, boots, no badge visible. The specific exhaustion that settles into someone's face when they've been working a case longer than they want to admit. She approached Ironside directly. Agent Brennan, FBI, I'm told you have something relevant to an open federal investigation. Ironside didn't extend his hand. Depends on what you're investigating. Kenneth Vaughn, Cornerstone Kitchen Solutions, NSLP fraud. We've been building a case for 7 months. Can't move without airtight documentation. How long has your office known about Vaughn Brennan's jaw tightened? 7 months. And how long has Elise Reeves been denied hot meals? I don't know who that is. 22 school days. We got her out of that cafeteria yesterday. You had 7 months. The silence stretched. Brennan didn't look away, didn't make excuses. We had the financial trail, she said finally. We didn't have victims willing to testify. Parents were scared. Teachers were reassigned. Every witness we approached either lawyered up or disappeared. We've been trying to build this case legally carefully by the book. And while you built it, a little girl went hungry. Yes, Ironside let that sit for 3 seconds. Then he gestured to the table. Razorback, show her what we have. Razorback laid it out in sequence. Documents placed one at a time. Marcus's payment confirmation screenshots beside Elise's account records showing -67. The suppressed NSLP applications, 47 families. The cornerstone invoices next to market rate comparisons. The unsealed marrow settlement. The medical chart, notes from Dr. Vance. Donna Creswell's testimony. Phoebe Washington's log. Brennan reviewed each item. Her expression shifted. She stopped writing, set her pen down and leaned forward. This fills a gap we haven't been able to close for 5 months. We had the money, we had the vendor fraud. What we didn't have was proof that real children were harmed as part of the scheme. Harm that Vaughn knew about and perpetuated intentionally. You have it now. Brennan pulled out her phone, made a call. Her voice was clipped professional. It's Brennan. I need a warrant package expedited. Kenneth Vaughn Roosevelt Elementary. Fraud, wire fraud, child endangerment. I'll have probable cause to you in 90 minutes. She ended the call, looked at Ironside. I need one thing from you. Name it. Elise Reeves gets a victim advocate assigned before we interview her. And nobody talks to her without her uncle present and without her saying yes first. Done. Brennan nodded, gathered the documents. We'll be in touch. She walked back to her car. Ironside watched her go. She's not the enemy, Gravel said quietly. No, but the system she works for moves slow, and slow costs children time they don't have. She's moving now because we bought her the time to move. At 3:47, Kenneth Vaughn was in his office on the phone with the district's communications coordinator, asking for approved messaging language to respond to a concerned parent group that had assembled outside the school. He didn't say bikers. He said concerned parent group because that language sounded manageable. He was told to avoid direct engagement, refer all questions to the district, and document any interactions for legal review. He hung up, looked at his computer screen. The third grant application, $113,700, still under review. The audit window closed in 11 days. If he could just hold the line for 11 more days, the application would be approved. The money would flow, and this would blow over the way these things always blew over. Parents got upset. Parents threatened lawsuits. Parents eventually accepted that the system had processes, and those processes took time. He'd been doing this for 3 years. He knew how it worked. What he didn't know, sitting in his office at 3:47 on a Wednesday afternoon, reviewing his calendar and thinking about the community garden meeting he had scheduled for 5, was that at 3:52, Judge Morrison would sign a warrant. At 4:10, Agent Brennan would arrive at Roosevelt Elementary with 2 federal marshals. And at 4:14, his entire carefully constructed system would collapse into a single question that he would not be able to answer. Mr. Vaughn, can you explain why 17 children in your care were systematically denied food while you collected federal funding and diverted $157,500 to a vendor owned by your brother? They found him in the parking lot. He'd left through the side entrance, walking toward his car, keys in hand, checking his phone. He looked up, saw the marshals, saw Agent Brennan. His first expression wasn't fear, it was irritation. The specific irritation of a man interrupted during a routine task. Mr. Vaughn, I'm Special Agent Brennan, FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest. On what charge? Wire fraud. theft of federal funds, child endangerment, conspiracy to defraud the United States. The irritation slipped. Confusion replaced it. There's been a mistake. No, sir, there hasn't. Turn around, please. He did. Slowly. Hands came up automatically. He'd never been arrested, but he'd seen it on television. The marshals cuffed him, read him his rights right there in the parking lot, under the azaleas, in front of three teachers and a parent volunteer who'd stop walking when they saw the suits. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Vaughn wasn't listening. His mind was racing. Wire fraud, federal funds, conspiracy. Those were serious. Those were prison. I need to call my attorney. You'll have access to a phone at processing. They walked him toward the unmarked car. His hands were cuffed behind his back. His Oxford shirt was wrinkled now. Where the marshals had gripped his arms, he looked back once. At the school, at the building he'd run for 3 years, at the community garden he'd planted, in the PDA budget he'd managed, in the Meals on Wheels route he drove every Tuesday. He looked like a man who couldn't understand how his Tuesday had turned into this. That was the thing about people like Kenneth Vaughn. They never saw themselves as villains. They saw themselves as administrators, problem solvers, people who made hard decisions other people didn't have the stomach for. The children were fed, weren't they? Bread and milk. That was food. Nobody had died. Nobody had been hit. He'd just managed resources, followed the system, made it work. The fact that he'd made it work by turning children's hunger into a line item that didn't register as evil, it registered as efficiency, and that belief that cruelty could be filed, documented, budgeted, was the most dangerous thing about him. Marcus Reeves stood in the parking lot of Holly Springs Town Hall at 4:32, watching federal marshals put Kenneth Vaughn into the back of an unmarked sedan. He felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just exhaustion. 3 years ago, a judge had looked at his vest and decided that was the whole story worth knowing. Had taken his daughter Cassidy from him because the patches on his back mattered more than 19 years of steady employment, a mortgage paid on time, a home inspection that found nothing wrong. The system had decided he was unfit. And now that same system had protected a man who turned children's hunger into a budget line, had paid him 6 figures to go away quietly, had transferred him to a new school where he could do it again. Kenneth Vaughn had created malnutrition in a child and gotten a severance package. Marcus had worn leather and lost custody. The hypocrisy didn't just burn, it clarified. Systems protect their own, punish outsiders, even when the outsiders are trying to protect children and the insiders are harming them. Ironside walked up beside him, didn't say anything, just stood there. After a long moment, Marcus spoke. You ever wonder if we're just putting our fingers in the dam every day? Then why do we keep doing it? Ironside looked at him, 64 years old, gray beard, eyes that had seen too much and still showed up anyway, because the alternative is walking away. And I tried that once. Didn't take. They stood in silence as the federal car pulled out of the parking lot. Across the street, Elise Reeves sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's truck, reading Nancy Drew, the book Halftone had given her. A girl detective who asked questions and got answers. She looked up when Marcus climbed into the driver's seat. Is it over? Marcus started the engine. This part is. What about the other parts? He looked at her. 8 years old, gap-toothed, holding a book about a girl who solved mysteries. We'll handle those when they come. She nodded, serious, then went back to her book. Marcus pulled out of the parking lot, drove toward the duplex that would be home now. The place where Elise had a room with morning light and a bookshelf and a bed that nobody could take away. On his phone in a folder labeled, "Why We Ride," three new messages waited. From parents he'd never met, in towns he'd never been to, saying the same thing in different words. "You saved more than one kid." And Marcus understood, driving through quiet streets with his niece reading beside him, that this was the work now. Not one rescue, but 1,000 small battles. A war that never ended. And he'd made his peace with it, because the alternative was letting children like Elise disappear into systems that measured them by what they cost instead of what they were worth. And he'd already lost one daughter to that math. He wasn't losing another. The medical exam happened 3 days after Kenneth Vaughn's arrest. Halftone, the younger brother, 38, the one with the camera and the easy smile, drove Elise and Marcus to Holly Springs Pediatrics at 9 on Saturday morning. He didn't have to. His job was documentation, not transportation. But he'd brought a book anyway, left it on the passenger seat when Elise got out. "That's for you if you want it." She picked it up, looked at the cover. Nancy Drew, The Secret of the Old Clock. A girl who solved mysteries. A girl who asked questions and got answers. "Thank you. You're welcome, kid." He waited in the lobby while Dr. Gerald Vance did the exam, sat with his back to the wall, jacket draped over the chair beside him. Phone silenced. 20 minutes passed. 30. Parents came and went with their children. A toddler cried, a mother soothed. Normal sounds. The sounds of a place where children came to be cared for, not managed. When Elise and Marcus emerged, Vance was with them. He walked them to the lobby, crouched to Elise's level. "Elise, you're doing great. Your weight's already up 1.5 pounds. That's exactly what we want to see. Keep eating when you're hungry. Your body knows what it needs." "When do I come back?" "2 weeks, just to check in. Make sure everything's moving in the right direction." He stood, looked at Halftone, then at Marcus. His voice dropped lower. "Thank you for getting her here when you did. Another month like the last one and we'd be talking about hospitalization for refeeding. You didn't just save her comfort. You saved her health." Halftone nodded once. Marcus's throat was tight. He didn't trust his voice. He just took Elise's hand and walked toward the exit. In the truck, she opened the Nancy Drew book, flipped through the pages, stopped on chapter 3, read silently while Halftone drove. The morning sun came through the window, caught the edge of her face, showed the dark circles under her eyes starting to fade. She was still small for her age, still carrying weight she shouldn't have to carry, but her hand wasn't under the table anymore, and that was something. The first safe meal happened that night. Marcus's kitchen. Nothing fancy. Spaghetti with jarred sauce, garlic bread from the freezer section, a bagged salad he'd bought on the way home. He wasn't a great cook. He was a competent cook. There was a difference. Elise sat at the table, watched him stir the pasta, pull the bread from the oven. The smell filled the small kitchen. Garlic butter, tomato warmth. The smell of food made for eating, not for demonstrating scarcity. He plated it, set it in front of her, sat down across from her with his own plate. She looked at it. At the pile of spaghetti, the 2 slices of bread, the salad in a small bowl beside it. It was more food than she'd eaten at one time in weeks. "You don't have to finish it," Marcus said quietly. "Just eat until you're full. Whatever's left we'll save." She picked up her fork, twirled spaghetti the way children do, careful, concentrating, took a bite, chewed slowly, swallowed. Marcus ate his own food, didn't watch her, didn't comment. Just let the meal be a meal. No timer, no consequence, no negotiation. Halfway through, she stopped, set her fork down, looked at him. Uncle Marcus. Yeah, Elise girl, I'm full. Okay? I'm really full. That's good. That's exactly how it's supposed to feel. She looked at the remaining food on her plate. A third of it left, maybe more. And for the first time in 22 days, leaving food on a plate didn't mean she was ungrateful or wasteful or breaking a rule. It just meant she was full. She exhaled, long and shaky, then she smiled, gap-toothed, both front teeth showing, and the sound she made was something between a laugh and a sob. I forgot what this felt like. Marcus reached across the table, took her hand, didn't say anything. Couldn't. His chest was too tight and his eyes were burning, and if he tried to speak right now, he'd break. So he just held her hand and let her know without words that she was safe. She was fed, and nobody was taking that away. The garlic bread sat on the counter cooling. The smell would linger in the kitchen for hours. And that was the thing about safety. Sometimes it smelled like butter on and garlic. Sometimes it looked like a half-finished plate of spaghetti. Sometimes it was just the permission to stop eating when you were full. The housing solution came together over 4 days through a network Marcus hadn't known existed until Ironside made a call. A retired teacher named Margaret Hollis owned a duplex 2 miles from Elise's school. One side was rented. The other had been empty for 3 months while she waited for the right tenant. Right tenant meant someone she trusted, someone who'd take care of the place, someone who wouldn't disappear when rent was late. Ironside vouched for Marcus. Margaret said that was enough. The brothers helped move them in on Sunday. Tank and Steel brought a truck. Reaper brought cleaning supplies and spent 2 hours scrubbing the kitchen and bathroom. Flintlock the elder heaven appear for the man who'd said 4 words since arriving in Holly Springs and hadn't needed to say more brought a toolbox and fixed the leaky faucet in the bathroom sink, the sticking door on the bedroom closet, and the loose handle on the oven. The chapter had raised $9,347 through an emergency fund, gas money, moving costs, first month's rent, security deposit, and a cushion for groceries and utilities. Razorback handed Marcus the envelope at the duplex's front door. This is from 63 brothers across 3 chapters. It's not a loan. It's not charity. It's family taking care of family. Marcus's voice was rough. I don't know how to. You don't have to. Just take care of that girl. That's the payment. By nightfall, they had furniture in place. Nothing fancy, mostly secondhand, but functional and clean. A couch, a kitchen table, 2 beds. Elise's room had a window facing east. Morning light, a small bookshelf Tank had built in his garage the night before. She stood in the doorway of her new room, backpack on the floor beside her, the Nancy Drew book in her hands, looked at the bookshelf, looked at the bed, full size which was bigger than she'd ever had, looked at Marcus. This is mine, this is yours. Nobody's going to take it away. Nobody's going to take it away. She set the book on the shelf carefully, like she was practicing. Then she unzipped her backpack's front pocket and pulled out the spelling trophy. 4 inches tall, pale gold plastic. The proof that she'd once been a child a room had applauded. She placed it beside the book. Not hidden anymore. Just there. The brothers said goodbye in shifts. They'd been in Holly Springs for 3 days. Some had jobs to get back to, families waiting, lives that had paused but couldn't pause forever. Steele left first. The strategist, The one who'd mapped the investigation like a military operation. He crouched beside Elise on the duplex front step. You did good, kid. You wrote that note. You trusted your uncle. That took guts. I was scared. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the thing anyway. He stood, shook Marcus's hand, and was gone. Halftone lingered at his truck, adjusting his camera bag, clearly stalling. Finally turned back. Marcus, I'm going to send you the footage, all of it. Not just what makes the documentary, everything. Elise's testimony, the cafeteria, the arrest. You should have it in case she ever wants to see proof that people showed up. She knows people showed up. Yeah, but someday she might need to be reminded. We all do. He pulled a business card from his wallet, wrote his personal cell number on the back, handed it to Elise. Anytime. I mean it. You need something, you call. She took the card, held it carefully. Thank you for the book. Read it twice. Nancy's good at this stuff. Reaper was last. The medic. The one who checked Elise's vitals the first night. Gentle and thorough, and had quietly flagged to Marcus that her blood pressure was low and her hands were cold. Signs of a body under stress. He didn't crouch. He sat on the step beside her, elbows on his knees, looking out at the quiet street. Your uncle's a good man, but if he ever needs backup, if something happens and you need help and you can't reach him, you call Ironside. Numbers in your uncle's phone. We don't leave people behind. You're part of this now. Elise looked at him, at the patches on his vest, the gray in his beard, the hands that had checked her pulse and told her she was going to be okay. Are you really bad guys? He smiled, slow and sad. Some people think so, but the people who matter know different. Remember that, kid? What people think you are and what you actually are, those are two different things, and only one of them matters. He stood, nodded to Marcus, got on his bike, and rode out. By sunset, the parking lot was empty. The rumble was gone. Holly Springs looked like Holly Springs again. Quiet streets, trimmed lawns, families eating dinner behind closed doors. But Roosevelt Elementary would never look the same, because 191 people had decided it shouldn't. 6 weeks after Kenneth Vaughn's arrest, Marcus stood in the parking lot of Holly Springs Pediatrics at 7:20 on a Thursday evening. He wasn't supposed to be there. Elise's appointment had been at 4. He dropped her off, gone back to work, finished a transmission rebuild, picked her up at 5:15. They'd gone home. She'd done homework. He'd made dinner. Normal. Except he'd left his jacket in the waiting room. And when he came back to get it, he found Dr. Gerald Vance locking up for the night. Marcus forgets something, yeah. Jacket, sorry. Vance unlocked the door, let him in, flipped the lights back on. The waiting room was empty, chairs lined up, magazines stacked, the smell of antiseptic and air freshener. Marcus grabbed his jacket from the coat rack, turned to leave, stopped. Can I ask you something? Sure, when you saw her that first time February, when you wrote that note in her chart about nutritional concerns, did you know Vance was quiet for a moment? Did I know someone was starving her on purpose? No. Did I know something was wrong? Yes. And I documented it, and I told myself that was enough. You couldn't have known. I could have asked better questions, could have pushed harder, could have filed a report instead of just noting a concern, but I didn't. Because filing a report meant involving DSS, and involving DSS meant accusing someone, and accusing someone meant I had to be sure. So I chose careful over urgent. That's not on you. No, but it's with me. Vance looked at the empty waiting room. I see a lot of kids. Most of them are fine. Some of them aren't. And the ones who aren't, they're usually not fine in ways that are easy to see. Bruises, breaks, things I'm trained to spot. But a kid slowly losing weight because her school is withholding food while collecting federal money, that's a different kind of harm. Quieter, more bureaucratic. And I almost missed it. Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. She's doing better now, Vance said. Weight's up 3.5 pounds, color's better. She's sleeping. That's all moving in the right direction. You got her out in time, we got her out. Vance smiled, tired, grateful. Yeah, we did. Marcus left, drove home through quiet streets, pulled into the duplex's driveway. Sat in the truck for a long moment with the engine off, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. He'd done the thing he'd come to do. He'd kept Elise safe. He'd called his brothers and they'd answered, and together they'd stopped something that shouldn't have been allowed to exist. But there was a folder on his phone now, labeled Why We Ride, messages from strangers whose families had been saved. Parents who'd heard what happened in Holly Springs and reached out to say thank you, to say me too, to say I thought I was the only one. He opened the folder, scrolled past the messages he'd already read, found a new one sent 2 hours ago. My son's school was doing the same thing. Lunch debt letters, public shaming. We tried to fight it, nobody listened. Then we showed them what happened in North Carolina. Showed them the news coverage, showed them 191 bikers standing in a parking lot because 17 kids were hungry. The policy changed in 3 days. I don't know your name, but thank you. You saved more than one kid. Marcus closed the folder, locked his phone, went inside. Elise was at the kitchen table. Nancy Drew book open, spelling words written in careful print on notebook paper. She looked up when he walked in. Uncle Marcus. How do you spell justice? He spelled it. Watched her write it down. Watched her underline it twice. That's for my vocabulary test tomorrow. Miss Aldridge says we have to use it in a sentence. What sentence are you going to use? She thought about it, pencil tapping against the paper. Then she wrote, slow and careful. Justice is when someone helps even if it's hard. Marcus read it over her shoulder. His throat went tight. That's a good sentence, Elise, girl. You think I'll get it right. I think you already did. The call came at 9:43 on a Friday night, 2 months and 17 days after Vaughn's arrest. Marcus was watching television with the sound low, Elise asleep in her room. The duplex quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on the highway. His phone buzzed, unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then he saw the North Carolina area code and picked up. Hello, Mr. Reeves. This is Sharon Henley. I'm with the Wake County District Attorney's Office. I'm sorry to call us so late, but I wanted to give you advance notice before this becomes public tomorrow morning. Notice about what Kenneth Vaughn entered a plea agreement this afternoon. He's pleading guilty to wire fraud, theft of federal funds, and child endangerment. In exchange for cooperation in the investigation of his brother and the district officials who facilitated the fraud, he'll serve 8 years federal prison with possibility of parole after 5. Marcus sat forward. Television forgotten. 8 years. I know that might sound light given the severity of what he did, but his cooperation is helping us build cases against 11 other individuals, including 2 district administrators and a school board member who approved the grant applications knowing they contain false information. Without his testimony, those people walk. What about restitution? All families affected will receive full restitution. That includes back payment for every meal, denied compensation for emotional harm, and funds for nutritional counseling if needed. The federal government is also implementing new oversight protocols for NSLP programs statewide. What happened at Roosevelt Elementary is going to change how North Carolina monitors school lunch programs. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Does Elise have to testify? Not unless she wants to. Vaughn's plea means no trial, but if she'd like to submit a victim impact statement for the sentencing hearing, we can arrange that. She doesn't have to read it in person. She can write it and we'll submit it on her behalf. I'll ask her. Mr. Reeves, I want you to know that what you did calling your people, documenting everything, forcing us to look at this, it made the difference. The FBI had been investigating for months and couldn't build a case that would hold. You gave them what they needed. I didn't do it alone, no, but you started it, and that matters. After he hung up, Marcus sat in the dark living room for a long time. 8 years. It didn't feel like enough, it didn't feel like justice, but it was more than nothing. More than a sealed settlement and a quiet transfer. More than a system protecting its own. It was accountability, and maybe that was all justice ever was. Not perfect, just better than what came before. He got up, walked quietly to Elise's room, pushed the door open just enough to see her sleeping, curled on her side. Nancy Drew book on the nightstand, spelling trophy beside it. She was safe. She was fed. She had a room that was hers, and the man who had tried to make her invisible was going to prison. That would have to be enough. 11 months and 3 weeks after Kenneth Vaughn's arrest, just 2 weeks past her 9th birthday in late August, Elise Reeves stood at the front of Roosevelt Elementary School's cafeteria during a district-wide assembly on student advocacy and nutrition security. She was 9 now, 4'3", 61 pounds. Honor roll every semester since the previous spring. She'd been asked to speak, not by the school. The school had a new principal now. Dr. Sharon Reeves, no relation, who had spent her first week on the job personally reviewing every lunch account and issuing refunds for unprocessed payments. But by a state representative who'd read about Holly Springs and wanted to understand how a child navigated a system designed to silence her. Elise had said yes on one condition: she got to write her own speech. So she stood there, at a podium adjusted down to her height, looking out at 340 students and 73 adults, and spoke in a voice that didn't shake. My name is Elise Reeves. Last year I went 22 days without a hot lunch at the school. Not because my family couldn't pay, they paid twice. But the system didn't work, and when I tried to tell adults what was happening, the system said there was a process, and the process took longer than I had. She paused, glanced at her note card. She'd written it herself, practiced it with Miss Aldridge, and refused to let anyone edit it. I wrote a note. I didn't understand what it meant, but I knew it was important. So I gave it to my uncle. And he didn't tell me there was a process. He didn't tell me to wait. He just believed me. And then he called people who believed him. And they came. Another pause. She found Marcus in the audience. Second row, vest on, arms crossed, jaw tight, because his niece was talking about the worst thing that had happened to her and he couldn't fix it from happening. Only from continuing. I don't think I'm supposed to say this part, but I'm going to anyway. The system didn't save me. People did. And those people look scary to some of the adults here, but they weren't scary to me. Because scary is being hungry in a room full of food and being told you can't have any. Scary is being stamped like you're a problem. Scary is telling adults something's wrong and being told to wait 30 days while you're still hungry. She looked at Dr. Reeves, at the district superintendent sitting in the front row, at the school board members who'd come because this was good PR, the reformed district, the transparent process, the lessons learned. So if you want to know how to help kids like me, here's how. Listen the first time. Don't make us prove we're worth helping. Don't make us wait for the paperwork. Just listen. And if you can't help, right away call someone who can. She stepped back from the podium. The cafeteria was silent. Then Miss Aldridge started clapping. Then the students joined. Then the adults had no choice. Elise walked back to her seat. Marcus reached out, squeezed her shoulder once as she passed. She didn't look at him, just took her seat beside Kira Bennett, the girl whose mother had paid in November and whose daughter still got stamped, and folded her hands in her lap like she hadn't just told an entire room of administrators that their system had failed and ordinary people had succeeded. After the assembly, a woman approached Marcus in the hallway, mid-30s, nervous, holding a little boy's hand. "Excuse me, are you Elise's uncle?" "I am. I just wanted to say thank you. My son goes to a different school, different district, but they had a lunch shaming policy too. After what happened here, parents started asking questions, started demanding accountability. The policy changed because of what you did, because people saw that someone fought back and won." The little boy looked up at Marcus, at his vest, at the patches. "Are you a superhero?" Marcus crouched, eye level. "No, buddy, I'm just an uncle. My teacher says superheroes help people. Then I guess a lot of people are superheroes. You don't need a cape. You just need to show up." The boy thought about this, nodded seriously. His mother smiled, eyes wet, and led him away. Marcus stood, looked at the cafeteria doors, at the banner, "Replaced now, same message. Every student matters," and wondered how many people had walked past that banner last year and believed it while children ate bread at the edges of the room. Belief was easy. Action was harder. 3 years and 10 months after Kenneth Vaughn's arrest on a cold Tuesday evening in November, Marcus Reeves got a phone call that reminded him the work was never finished. He was at the shop, engine bay of a Ford F-150 spread across his workbench, oil on his hands, classic rock playing low on the radio. His phone rang. He wiped his hands on a rag, checked the screen. Elise. She was supposed to be at the library, studying with friends, home by 7. It was 6:15. "Hey, Elise girl, everything okay?" Her voice was steady, calm, but he heard something underneath it, the careful control of someone managing a situation. "Uncle Marcus, I'm at Wake County Social Services. I'm okay, but I need you to come here." "What happened?" "There's a girl here. Her name's Mara. She's 10, and she needs help." Marcus was already moving, wiping oil off his hands, grabbing his keys. "I'm 15 minutes out. You stay right there. Is someone with you?" "The intake coordinator." "But Mara won't talk to her. She'll only talk to me." "Why?" "Because I told her I know what it's like when nobody listens." Marcus's chest tightened. "I'm on my way." He made one more call before he started the truck. Ironside answered on the first ring. "It's Reeves. Talk to me. I need 3 brothers and a DSS supervisor with override authority at Wake County Social Services. Now, we've got a 10-year-old girl whose foster placement is diverting her lunch money. She's gone 5 weeks without food at school. Elise is with her. I'm 15 minutes out. Give me the address. We'll be there in 20. The line went dead. Marcus started the engine, pulled onto the road. The speedometer climbed, not reckless, just fast enough. He'd thought the work was done, thought Vaughn's arrest and the policy changes and the district reforms meant it was over. But it wasn't over. It would never be over because systems move slowly and children needed help now. And the gap between those two realities was where kids like Mara fell through. Unless someone stood in the gap, unless someone decided that paperwork didn't matter more than a child's next meal, unless someone showed up. He pulled into the social services parking lot at 6:29. Two motorcycles were already there. Ironside's truck, a DSS supervisor's sedan. Marcus got out, walked toward the building. The automatic doors slid open. Inside, Elise sat beside a girl with dark hair and hollow eyes. Nancy drew book open between them. Elise was reading out loud, like nothing in the world was wrong, like she had all the time in the world, like Mara was worth waiting for. She looked up when Marcus walked in, smiled. Not because everything was fixed, because she knew he'd come. Uncle Marcus, this is Mara. Marcus knelt beside the 10-year-old girl whose hands were shaking and whose eyes were too old for her face. Hey, Mara, you did good. You told someone. That took guts. Is someone really coming? Someone's already here. You're looking at them. Three brothers walked through the doors behind him. The DSS supervisor was making calls, voice clipped and professional, overriding protocols that said midnight interventions required manager approval. Ironside stood at the reception desk, arms crossed, a wall of leather and patience. And Elise reached over, took Mara's hand, squeezed once. See, I told you. Same day. Mara sat in the corner of the social services intake room with her knees pulled to her chest and her eyes fixed on a point somewhere past Elise's shoulder. She'd been sitting like that for 47 minutes. Since the emergency placement coordinator had tried to ask her questions and Mara had gone silent in the specific way children go silent when they have learned that talking only makes things worse. The coordinator had called it non-cooperation. Elise called it survival. She'd seen it before, in her own mirror. 3 years ago when she'd learned to make herself smaller at table 14. When she'd learned that asking for help cost more than going hungry. So Elise didn't ask Mara questions. She just sat beside her, close enough to be present, far enough to not crowd, and opened Nancy Drew to chapter 7. Nancy examined the torn piece of fabric carefully. It was old, expensive, the kind of material that told a story if you knew how to listen. Elise read for 3 pages. Her voice steady, unhurried, like she had nowhere else to be and nothing more important to do than sit in a government office on a Tuesday evening reading about a fictional detective to a girl she'd never met. On the 4th page, Mara spoke. Does she figure it out? Elise looked up from the book. Mara nodded. Yeah, she always does. How she pays attention, and she doesn't give up, even when adults tell her she's wrong or she should wait or it's not her business. She just keeps looking until she finds the truth. Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then so softly, Elise almost missed it. I wish someone would look for me like that. Elise closed the book, set it on the floor between them. Someone is. That's why I'm here. You don't even know me. I know what it feels like when nobody listens. And I know what it feels like when someone finally does. So yeah, I don't know you yet, but I know enough. Mara's hands were still shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. What if I tell you and nothing changes? What if they just move me again and it's worse? Then we keep showing up until it gets better. That's what my uncle did. That's what his friends did. They didn't stop when the first person said no. They didn't stop when the system said wait. They just kept going until the right people had to listen. Mara looked at her, really looked at her, searching for something, proof maybe, or permission. Your uncle, Elise said quietly, the one who showed up. He's outside right now, with people who do this, who help kids like us. But they can't help if you don't tell them what's wrong. So I'm going to ask you one question, and you don't have to answer it. But if you do, I promise someone will hear you. She pulled out her phone, the one Marcus had given her when she started middle school, scrolled to his contact, hit call, put it on speaker. The line rang twice. Elise girl, everything okay? Elise slid the phone across the floor to Mara, nodded. Go ahead. Mara looked at the phone, at Elise, at the open doorway where the intake coordinator was typing on a computer and pretending not to listen. And she talked. My name is Mara Jensen. I'm 10. I've been in foster care for 8 months. 3 different houses. The first one was okay, but they moved and couldn't take me. The second one had too many kids and not enough space. This one, the one I'm in now. Mr. Garrett takes the food money, the lunch account money. He says I'm eating him out of house and home. Says he feeds me at home so I don't need school lunch. But he doesn't. He feeds me at home when people are watching. When the social worker visits or when church people come by. The rest of the time it's whatever I can find. Crackers, old bread, sometimes nothing. The school keeps sending letters about my lunch account. He throws them away. I haven't had a hot lunch in 5 weeks. I'm hungry all the time. But I can't tell anyone because last time I told a teacher at my old school that I was hungry, she called my foster mom, and my foster mom said I was lying for attention, and they moved me anyway. I don't want to move again. But I can't keep doing this. Her voice broke on the last word. On the other end of the line, Marcus was silent for 3 seconds. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet, very steady. Mara, my name's Marcus. I'm Elise's uncle, and I'm going to make sure the people who need to hear what you just said hear it tonight. Okay, you're going to be all right. Elise is going to stay with you until someone safe shows up. And someone safe is going to show up. That's a promise. Okay. The line went dead. Elise picked up the phone, looked at Mara. See same day. The thing about Marcus Reeves was this. He'd lost his own daughter to a system that decided his vest told the whole story. He'd spent 3 years being exactly who he'd always been, while a family court ruling sat on his chest like something he couldn't put down. He'd learned to be careful, to follow the rules, to prove over and over that he was safe. And then Elise had needed him, and all that careful disappeared. Because when it came down to it, the choice was simple. He could protect his own standing in a system that didn't trust him, or he could protect a child who did. He chose the child. He'd choose the child every time. Now standing in the social services lobby at 6:34 on a Tuesday evening, watching his niece read to a girl she'd just met, watching his brothers fill the space with the same quiet presence they'd brought to Holly Springs 3 years ago, he understood what the rest of his life would look like. Not one rescue, but 1,000 small battles. A war that never ended. And he'd made his peace with it, because the alternative was letting children disappear into systems that measured them by what they cost instead of what they were worth. And he'd already lost one daughter to that math. He wasn't losing another. Not ever again. Angela Martinez, the DSS supervisor who'd overridden 4 protocols to get here, came out of her office at 7:12. She walked straight to Marcus in Ironside. Mr. Garrett's been flagged. Emergency removal order is being processed. I've already called the foster care coordinator. They're pulling his license pending investigation. Any other children in his care are being relocated tonight. How many others, too? Both under 8. Marcus closed his eyes. 3 kids. 3 kids in one house going hungry while a man collected stipends meant to feed them. Ms. Martinez, how does someone like that get approved as a foster parent? Her expression tightened. The same way someone like Kenneth Vaughn gets approved as a principal. The system checks boxes, background checks, training certificates, home inspections, but it doesn't check hearts, and it moves too slow to catch the people who know how to look good on paper and act differently when no one's watching. So what's the fix? She looked at Ironside, at the brothers standing in the lobby, at Marcus, people like you, showing up, making noise, refusing to let children disappear into the gaps. That's the only fix that works. Margaret Hollis was waiting on the front porch when they pulled up at 8:37. 71 years old, white hair pulled back in a bun, cardigan over a floral dress, the kind of woman who looked like she should be baking cookies and probably was. She came down the steps as Mara got out of the truck. You must be Mara. I'm Margaret. I've got your room all set up. Clean sheets, extra blankets, and I made soup. Nothing fancy, just chicken noodle. But it's hot and there's plenty. Mara looked at her, suspicious, hopeful, exhausted. I don't have money to pay you. Margaret smiled. Good thing I'm not asking for any then. Come on, let's get you inside. It's cold out here. The room was small but warm. A bed with a quilt, a desk by the window, a lamp with a soft yellow bulb, and on the dresser a note written in careful script. Welcome home. This space is yours. No one will take it away. Mara read it 3 times. Elise stood in the doorway with Marcus. It's real. Elise said quietly, I promise. Mara set her backpack down, sat on the edge of the bed, put her face in her hands, and cried. Not quiet crying, not controlled. The kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and broken. The kind that only happened when you finally felt safe enough to fall apart. Margaret sat beside her, didn't touch her, didn't shush her, just sat there, present. Marcus and Elise stepped back into the hallway. She's going to be okay, Marcus said. Eventually, but it's going to take time. That's the thing they don't tell you. Saving someone isn't one moment. It's 1,000 small ones. Showing up, being consistent, not leaving. You learn that from Cassidy. He looked at her, surprised. You never talk about her. Because it hurts, and because I lost her and I couldn't fix it. But I learned from it. I learned that love isn't enough if you can't prove it. If you can't show up in ways the system recognizes. I love Cassidy, but the judge didn't care. He cared about forms and evaluations and the way I looked in a courtroom. Do you ever talk to her once a year on her birthday? Her mother lets me send a card. I don't know if Cassidy reads them, but I send them anyway. What do you say? That I'm proud of her, that I love her, that I'm sorry I couldn't be what the system needed me to be. Maybe someday the system will change. Maybe. But I'm not waiting for it. I'm just doing what I can with what I have. Elise leaned against the wall, looked through the doorway at Mara sitting on the bed with Margaret beside her. Uncle Marcus, yeah, I want to do this. What you do? Helping kids, I want to make it my job. You're 12, I know. But in 6 years, I'll be 18 and I can go to school for social work or advocacy or whatever it takes. And I can be the person I needed 3 years ago. Marcus looked at her, at the girl who'd sat at table 14 with a stamp on her hand, who'd written a note she didn't understand because she trusted him to know what it meant. Who'd become someone other kids trusted because she'd been there. You'd be good at it. I learned from the best. They stayed until Mara fell asleep. Soup eaten, face washed, tucked under the quilt with Nancy Drew on the nightstand and Margaret in the next room. Ironside was waiting outside. She settled, yeah, finally, good. Crowbar got confirmation. Garrett's being arrested tomorrow morning. The other two kids are in emergency placement with vetted families. And Martinez is fast-tracking an investigation into how he got approved in the first place. How many others are out there like him? Too many. But one less tonight. They stood in the driveway. Cold November air. Stars visible above the streetlights. You know this doesn't end, Ironside said. Tomorrow there'll be another call. Another kid. Another system failing. I know. And you're okay with that. Marcus thought about Elise at 12 years old reading to a 10-year-old she'd just met. About Mara crying on a bed in a room that was finally hers. About Cassidy opening birthday cards from a father she barely remembered. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Because the alternative is pretending it's not happening. And I tried that. Doesn't work. Ironside nodded. Then I'll see you next time. Next time. 5 years later, Elise Reeves stood in the lobby of Wake County Social Services on her first day as a certified peer advocate. She was 17, senior year of high school. College applications submitted to 6 schools with social work programs. A recommendation letter from Angela Martinez that called her the most dedicated advocate Martinez had worked with in 23 years. Her supervisor handed her a case file. This is Jenna, 13, been in the system 18 months, 3 placements, currently at Crossroads Group Home. She shut down, won't talk to anyone, won't engage with counseling. We think she'll respond to peer advocacy. What's her story? Neglect case. Mother struggled with addiction, father's not in the picture. Jenna took care of her younger siblings until DSS got involved. She feels like she failed them. Elise read the file, saw herself in every line. When can I meet her today if you want? She's at the group home now. Fair warning though, she's tough. She doesn't trust easy. Elise smiled. Good, neither did I. She drove to Crossroads in the truck Marcus had given her for her 17th birthday. Used but reliable. The kind of vehicle that said, I trust you to be independent. Jenna was sitting in the common room, arms crossed, expression flat, the specific flatness of someone who'd been asked too many questions by too many adults who didn't actually listen to the answers. Elise sat down across from her, didn't introduce herself, didn't ask how she was feeling, just pulled out a book, Nancy Drew, The Hidden Staircase, started reading out loud. Nancy paused at the bottom of the stairs. Something wasn't right. The air felt different, colder, like a secret waiting to be discovered. Jenna didn't react, didn't look up. Elise kept reading. 3 pages in, Jenna spoke. Why are you reading that to me? Elise looked up from the book. Because I'm not good at small talk. And I figured if I was going to sit here and not pressure you to talk, I might as well read something good. You're supposed to ask me questions. That's what they all do. I'm not them. Jenna looked at her. Really looked at her. What are you then? Someone who gets it. Someone who was in a room like this once. Different room, different situation, but the same feeling of nobody listening. They sent you because you're supposed to relate to me. They sent me because I asked to meet you. I read your phone, saw parts of my story in yours. Thought maybe you could use someone who actually knows what it feels like. What does it feel like you're screaming underwater and everyone's acting like you're just being quiet? Jenna's expression cracked. Just slightly. Just enough. Yeah, like that. Elise closed the book, set it on the table between them. So here's the deal. I'm not going to ask you how you're feeling or what you need or any of that stuff you've heard 100 times. I'm just going to be here. And if you want to talk, we talk. If you want to sit in silence, we sit in silence. And if you want me to keep reading about Nancy Drew solving mysteries, I'll do that too. What if I want you to leave? Then I'll leave. But I'll come back tomorrow and the day after until you believe I'm not going anywhere. Why would you do that? Because someone did it for me and it saved my life. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Jenna spoke, so quietly Elise almost missed it. I miss my brother and sister. I know. They took them to a different placement, said it was better for them, but I raised them since they were babies, and now I don't even know if they're okay. Elise pulled out her phone, opened her notes app. What are their names? Connor and Lily. How old? Connor's 8. Lily's 5. Elise typed, then looked up. I can't promise I can find them, but I know people who might be able to help, people who care about keeping siblings together. Can I ask? Jenna's eyes filled. You'd do that, I'd try. Why? Elise thought about Marcus kneeling beside her at table 14, about Ironside walking into Roosevelt Elementary with brothers who refused to leave, about Mara sleeping in a room that was finally hers. Because that's what people who show up do. They don't just talk about caring, they prove it. 3 months later, Jenna sat in a visitation room with Connor and Lily. The reunification wasn't permanent yet. There were still hoops to jump through, evaluations, court dates, but they were together, and that was a start. Elise watched through the window as Jenna hugged her siblings, as Connor showed her a drawing he'd made, as Lily climbed into her lap and refused to let go. Angela Martinez stood beside her. You did good work on this one. We did good work. You pulled strings I didn't even know existed. That's my job. Yours was getting her to trust the system enough to let us help. She didn't trust the system. She trusted me. Same thing. No, it's not. The system breaks trust every day. People rebuild it. There's a difference. Martinez was quiet for a moment. You're going to be better at this than I am. You know that, right? I learned from you. No, you learn from experience. I just gave you the tools. What you do with them, that's all you. Elise looked through the window again, at Jenna laughing, at Connor and Lily safe. I want to do this forever. Every day. Every kid who needs someone to show up. It'll break your heart sometimes. I know. But it'll also put it back together. That's the trade. Then welcome to the work. On her 18th birthday, Elise stood in Marcus's garage while he rebuilt a carburetor. He worked with the same steady focus he brought to everything. Hands sure, mind clear, she leaned against the workbench. I got my acceptance letters, and 6 schools accepted me. Full ride to 3. Which one are you choosing? The one 40 minutes from here. You could go anywhere. Why stay? Because the work is here. The kids who need help are here, and you're here, Elise. You don't have to stay because of me. I'm not. I'm staying because this is where I can make the biggest difference. I know these systems. I know these people. And I know what it takes to fight them. You sound like me. Good. You taught me. He pulled her into a hug, rare for him, but earned. I'm proud of you. You know that I know. Your mom would be too. Elise pulled back, looked at him. You never talk about her. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Your mom was the best person I knew. She fought for everyone, strangers, friends, family. When she died, I didn't think I'd survive it. And then they gave me you, and I realized I had to, because she'd want me to. Do you think she'd approve of what we do? He smiled, sad and sure. I think she'd be leading the charge. Then let's keep going. Marcus Reeves stood in the parking lot of Wake County Social Services at 9:43 on a Saturday morning, 11 years after he'd walked into Roosevelt Elementary and found his niece with a stamp on her hand. He was 53 now, more gray in his hair, more weight in his shoulders, but the same steady presence. Elise walked out with a teenage boy, 16. Thin, guarded, the specific guardedness of someone who'd learned that adults made promises they didn't keep. Marcus, this is Devin. Devin, this is my Uncle Marcus, the one I told you about. Devin looked at the vest, at the patches, at Marcus. You're the guy who got the principal arrested. That was a team effort. But yeah, I was there. Elise says you help kids. When I can. Why Marcus thought about that, about all the answers he could give, about Cassidy and Elise and Mara and Jenna and the 100 other kids whose names he knew and the 1,000 he didn't, because someone has to, and I'd rather it be me than no one. Devin nodded slowly. Elise says you can help me get my GED, that you know people. I know people, and yeah, I can help if you want it. I want it. I just don't know if I can do it. Marcus looked at Elise, at the girl who'd become a woman who fought for children the way he'd fought for her. Then looked back at Devin. Here's what I know. You made it this far. You survived things you shouldn't have had to survive. That takes more strength than most people will ever need. So yeah, you can do this, and we'll be here while you do. Devin's jaw tightened, eyes wet. Okay, okay. They stood in the parking lot, morning sun breaking through clouds, the sound of traffic on the highway, the ordinary sounds of an ordinary day that would change Devin's life because someone had shown up. Elise put her hand on Devin's shoulder. Same day, remember. And Marcus understood, watching them walk back toward the building, that this was the legacy. Not the arrest or the news coverage or the policy changes. This, one person showing up for another, one person refusing to let a child disappear, one person saying, I see you and I'm not leaving. That was justice, not perfect, not complete, not finished, but real and worth every single fight. This story isn't about bikers or patches or federal lunch fraud mechanics. It's about what happens when a system asks a child to wait and someone says no. Elise Reeves's hunger wasn't an oversight. It was a line item. The stamp on her hand wasn't a reminder. It was a measurement instrument documenting need, so a grant application could justify a fraudulent vendor contract. Kenneth Vaughn didn't hate those children. He needed them hungry enough to be useful. That's not better, it's worse. Because hatred requires you to notice the person. What Vaughn required was that they remain measurably insufficient, small enough to be a number, visible enough to be evidence, silent enough to be manageable. The most corrosive institutional abuse is the kind that can be filed, has a budget code, looks like administration, and the only defense against it is people who refuse to wait for paperwork to approve their compassion. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told there's a process when what you needed was a person, this story is for you. If you've ever been the one who looked away because it wasn't your problem, because someone else would handle it, because you didn't want to make things worse, this story is also for you. Because here's the truth. You don't need 191 motorcycles to change a story. You need one person who listens the first time, one person who believes a child over a principal, one person who calls someone else and says, I need help, and actually gets it. Protecting a child doesn't require a title. It requires a decision. And that decision doesn't look like what you've been taught to expect. It doesn't look like a courtroom or a social worker or a policy change, though those things matter and they came. It looks like a man kneeling beside a cafeteria table. It looks like a phone call that lasts 11 seconds. It looks like 191 engines going silent all at once because the loudest thing in the room was supposed to be the children who had been quiet for too long. Elise Reeves is 18 now, about to start college, majoring in social work. She volunteers at social services 3 days a week. She reads Nancy Drew to kids who've learned not to trust adults. And she keeps her spelling trophy on her bookshelf where anyone who walks into her room can see it. Not because she needs proof anymore, because she wants other kids to know that someone somewhere once decided she was worth applauding, and the people who decided that didn't need permission. They just needed her to ask. The cafeteria at Roosevelt Elementary still has that banner. Every student matters. And now, for the first time in 7 years, the kids eating there believe it. Because 191 people showed them it was true. And because one 8-year-old girl wrote a note she didn't understand and gave it to someone who did. And because that someone made a phone call. And because that phone call became a movement. And because that movement proved that the most powerful force against institutional cruelty isn't violence or money or political influence. It's ordinary people deciding that one child's hunger matters more than their comfort. That's the story, that's the truth, and that's why they ride.